Hello everyone, I welcome you to a lecture on Aecc English Communication. My name is Prachi P Tigga and I am Assistant Professor, Department of English, Nirmala College, Ranchi. Now, Aecc refers to your Ability Enhancement Compulsory course, and in this course, since you people have chosen English Communication, there are 4 units to the course and I will be dealing with Unit 1. Now, in Unit 1, we are going to cover what is communication, definitions, stages, barriers. There are various types of communication, what those are, like they can be divided into verbal and non-verbal. Besides that, there are other aspects of communication as well, like listening. We'll talk about the meaning of listening, the nature and importance of listening, as well as what are the principles of good listening. So, this is what forms the portion of Unit 1, and in my lectures, I will be dealing with all about the theory aspect of communication. So, let's begin. So, whenever we are taking a course on communication, the first question that comes to mind is that what exactly is communication? We need to think a little bit about it. So, communication, everybody will agree, plays a very significant or a very important role in our everyday lives. And if you notice, we spend a lot of time communicating. It is either you're communicating to a person, maybe you're communicating to your peers, your friends, right? You're communicating with your educators. Sometimes you're even communicating with yourself, with your pets. So, communication is something that we indulge a lot of time in. The reason being, it fulfills or it serves a purpose. It fulfills our personal needs, emotional needs, psychological, educational, social, financial, professional, and even cultural ones. So, life without communication is absolutely unimaginable because we will not be able to do anything without communication, and we would not be able to progress if the present world, whatever stage it is at today, it is only because humans have the special ability to communicate. And it is also one aspect which differentiates us from other animals. Like we have evolved a method and a language of communication which has helped us in our growth and development. So, one will agree that communication is something which is almost essential for existence itself. So it's very difficult to exist without communication, and in fact, our whole life depends on effective communication. Now, communication, you'll see there is a particular word used before it, which is effective, and this is something which plays a very important role. Communication, as it is not fruitful, but it needs to be effective. Okay, we'll discuss this in detail a little bit later. Now, what exactly is communication? It refers to any activity. This is what happens in communication, in which information, emotion, and feelings are transmitted or conveyed from one person to the other, right? So, it is a kind of exchange that is happening. A person is sending either information, they are conveying emotions and feelings, and the other person receives it. Through communication, what happens? Information is disseminated, it is distributed, and it is shared among people. The transfer of information from sender to the receiver, there is transfer of information that is taking place so that it can be understood in the right context. So, when two people are exchanging information, the other party needs to understand, the receiver needs to understand what the sender was trying to convey to them. So, in a nutshell, what is happening? A transmission is happening, an exchange is happening, or a transfer of happening. What is being transferred? It can be anything. It can be information, it can be feelings, emotions, right? So, an exchange or a transfer between two people regarding information can be referred to as communication, and this is what happens in the process of communication. Now, where does this word communication comes from? We will talk about the origin of the word itself, the word communication. Keep in mind that communication is a word that has been derived from the Latin word communicare, And the word communicare means to share. So what are we doing? We are sharing. Sharing of what? Sharing of information, ideas, knowledge, feelings, emotions, as we just discussed. There is another word which is Latin, communis, which translates to common. So communication has also known to have its roots in the word communis, which is a Latin word which means common. What is this word common referring to? Now, when the process of communication is taking place from the sender to the receiver, a common understanding must be reached between the two parties, the person who is sending the message and the person who is receiving the message. Once a common understanding is reached, when the meaning is being understood, that can be called or referred to as communication. So let's see what are the various definitions of communication that people have come up with. In general, communication is a term that is defined as the act of giving, receiving, or exchanging information, ideas, opinions, expressions, and emotions. These are the things that we just talked about. According to Luther, Luther defines communication, and if you are quoting Luther, try to quote it as he has defined it. Luther says, "It is the transmission of commonly meaningful information. It is a process that involves the exchange of behaviors." According to Katz and Kahn, it is defined as communication, the exchange of information and transmission of meaning, is the very essence of social system or an organization. So you'll find some common words being used in the definition. Both of them are talking about exchange or transmission of information. According to Dr. McFarland, he defines communication as communication is the process of meaningful interactions. So whatever interaction that is happening, it should have a meaning. Among human beings, it is a process by which meanings are perceived, received, perceived, understood, and understandings are reached among human beings. So all of these people talk about the exchange of information. The information that is being exchanged needs to be meaningful, and it is a process by which a common understanding among human beings is reached. A few other people have defined communication as well. According to Brown, communication is a process of transmitting ideas or thoughts from one person to another for the purpose of creating an understanding in the thinking of the person receiving communication. So the receiver needs to understand what the sender is trying to tell him. In the view of Sanborn, communication is the process of sending and receiving messages. This is the simplest one that you can use in your answers. According to Fortune, it is the name of a person. He says that communication, it is the procedure whereby one mind affects another. You share information from yourself to another person, from one's mind to another mind. That information is received, sent and received. So he talks about that particular process or procedure. According to Newman and Summer, communication is the exchange of facts, ideas, opinions, or emotions by two or more persons. Behind Brown says, communication is the transmission and interchange of facts, ideas, feelings, or course of action. And the last definition that I wanted to discuss is by a person called as Cumming M.W. And he says, the word communication describes the process of conveying messages, ideas, facts, attitudes, and opinions from one person to another so that they can be understood. Whatever the sender is trying to send to the receiver needs to receive it and understand it. So these are the multiple definitions of communication that many people have come up with, and in your answers you can use as many of them as you like. Now let us discuss the characteristics of communication. What are the different features? Characteristics refers to traits or special qualities. Okay. So, communication is a characteristic or a feature of human beings which differentiates us from other animals. We have a much advanced form of communication, a much advanced form of language that has been developed over the ages. And this is what differentiates us, makes us stand out from other species or other animals in the world. Humans use language to communicate, whereas animals do not. We use language, there are so many languages, and all these languages help us to communicate with each other. Communication is essentially a two-way process. There is a to and fro, there is a flow or exchange happening between two people. Information is not only to be sent but also supposed to be received as well as understood. So there is a sender, there is a receiver. This process is incomplete until the response or reaction is evoked and received. Now, if a sender sends a message to the receiver and the receiver does not respond back, that process of communication is considered to be incomplete. Okay? If a person is sending an information to another person, the person at the receiving end necessarily has to receive it and also give a kind of a response, a reaction, or a feedback. When that happens, then the process of communication is considered to be complete. There is a complete flow chart regarding this whole flow of information, which we'll be discussing in the next few classes. Now, this response or reaction is also called as feedback. Okay, it is an essential process or part of the communication. Until one receives feedback, the process is considered to be incomplete or ineffective. Do you remember we were talking about effective communication? This is where that word comes into play, that a feedback is 100% necessary for that communication to be considered as effective. And feedback may not always be in the form of a verbal response. It is not necessary that the person has to give you a reply back verbally. It can be non-verbal also. It can be in the way of a gesture. It can be in the way of action. For example, if you signal a person to come to you, or you call your friend, you make a gesture to your friend to come to you, and your friend does not come to you, so that actually means that there is an absence of feedback. That friend sees you, but she does not come to you. That means that is she has not understood, or she has failed to give a response or a reaction. So if that happens, then the whole process of communication becomes ineffective. Communication is an ongoing process. When communication is absent, when it is not there, human activity ceases. What is the meaning of the word cease? Stops. Human activity itself will stop, because it is something which is very essential for our existence itself. Another characteristic feature of communication is that it is essential in all types of organization and at all levels of management. There needs to be a constant flow of communication if any work needs to be done. The basic purpose of communication is to create a mental understanding by giving information as well as persuading or influencing others for an output or action. So, let me give you an example. Whenever you are given assignments in class, right? When your teacher gives you some kind of homework or an assignment, what is she trying to do? She is trying to give you instructions, she is trying to give you information. And what does she need you to do it? She needs you to understand that particular assignment so that you will be able to finish your work and submit in your homework or your report or your project. So it is the purpose of communication is to create a kind of a mental understanding. It also serves the purpose of persuading or influencing others for an output or an action. When you're trying to communicate, basically you're trying to make the other person understand or make the other person, agree with your point of view. You are trying to persuade the other person to believe in what you are trying to say. So that is one aspect of communication or a characteristic trait. Now, communication consists not only of facts but ideas and emotions as well. How are emotions a part of communication? For example, if you see a person in tears, if you see a friend of yours crying, it automatically communicates to you that she is not in a happy state of mind and she is sad, right? So, like that, emotions are a part of communication. A lot of times, people don't even have to say something, but if you observe them, their actions and gestures, and the way that they are behaving will communicate a lot of information to you. If somebody has a very genuine smile on their face, what are they communicating? Their smile is communicating that they are happy, right? So this is just a few. These were just a few examples of how emotions are a part of communication. The next point is that it is much more than just using words. The tone of voice, the facial expressions often carry a greater meaning than words. We can communicate a lot through signs, symbols, and gestures. Now, the tone of voice and facial expressions, if we talk about facial expressions, you will be able to relate with this. For example, if you are in a public place with your mother and she does not want you to do a particular thing, your mother does not even need to say a word to you. She'll give you a certain kind of look which can act as a warning sign that you're not supposed to do that, and you definitely will understand. So, facial expressions can carry a lot of meaning. You can understand if a person is happy, if a person is sad, if a person is confused, if you observe their facial expressions, even the tone of voice, the way a person greets you in the morning, okay, or the way a person wishes you farewell or bids you farewell will let you know what they actually mean by it, if they are happy doing it or if they are sad doing it. So, a lot of times, expressions carry a much more greater meaning than words. A person can be in tears, a person can be crying, and if you ask a question that, are you okay? The response might come, yes, I'm completely fine. But what is reality? The reality is that the person is not actually okay, right? So if they have tears in their eyes and if they are say that no, they are fine, they are happy, they are okay, it does not mean that. So there is a far more greater value in expressions than in simple words. So we communicate a lot through signs, we communicate a lot through symbols and gestures as well. Now, when we talk about communication happening through signs, symbols, and gestures, a very natural question comes up is that what are these things and how can they be differentiated? What does it mean? Sign is actually a representation of an object at a very reduced level. And what it means is that its meaning is universally shared by people all over the world. People understand the meaning of those signs. I'll give you an example. What do we do when we see red light at the traffic signal? It is a sign for you to stop. Similarly, green light at a traffic signal means it is a sign for you to move ahead. So, red light at a traffic signal is a kind of a sign. Another example is that if you see a skull followed by two bones in a cross sign, it is actually a universal sign for danger. So, those are those signs which people use to communicate. So, what is next? A symbol. A symbol is generally used in place of something else and are accepted as medium of communication. They can be verbal in spoken words, they can be graphic in written word, and they are representational in flag. There are certain things which are symbolic in nature, right? What is a gesture? A gesture is a movement which we use hand movements, right? For example, waving has a meaning. It can mean you're welcoming somebody with a hi, or if you're waving, it can also indicate that you're bidding farewell to the person. When you make, everybody I think recognizes the victory sign that is made by the first two fingers. Thumbs up, when we show thumbs up to a person, we are encouraging that person. Similarly, thumbs down refers to disencouragement, right? Saluting. So all these are gestures which people use in order to communicate. So communication need not always be verbal in form. It can be non-verbal also in nature, and still communication takes place. Now, all these things that we discussed, like the tone, the pitch of voice, gestures, facial expressions, so these are called as paralinguistic features. So, paralinguistic features such as tone, pitch, voice pitch, referring to pronunciation, appropriate gestures and postures, even the way that you sit in class. If you're slouching, if you have your hand underneath your chin, they are all indications that you're not interested. Whereas if you sit straight, it means that you are interested in listening to the other person. Facial expressions, we just discussed how you can recognize, happiness or sorrow or confusion or even fear in expressions. Eye contact, if a person avoids eye contact, what does it mean? It means that they are not ready to communicate with you. They do not have that confidence to look you in the eye. The way of dressing as well affects the oral process of communication. So all the process of oral communication that is happening, it gets affected by all these paralinguistic features. I just given you an example that if a person is crying and they are saying that no, I am okay and I am happy, it does not mean that he is happy or she is happy. He's actually sad, but he's just saying it for the sake of saying. So oral communication is affected by all these other things. Next point that we need to talk about is that communication is a very goal oriented process. By goal oriented, I mean that it needs to be effective in nature. We need a response, we need a feedback, we need an output. It can be effective if both the sender and the receiver are aware of the goal or final aim and work together in order to achieve effective communication, which is desired and necessary to get the desired output. Next point is that changes in the mood and thinking of the sender and receiver of the message influences the effectiveness of the communication. So it can be altered, it can be impacted if the sender and the receiver, uh, you know, their mood changes or they start having a different opinion from each other. It is considered to be a learned skill that is to be acquired over a period of time. Now, there is a particular word that has been used over here that it is a skill. When we talk about skill, we will also have to talk about something called as ability. On one hand, we have skill, on the other hand, we have ability. What is skill? Skill is something that you need to learn, whereas ability is something which you are inborn. Okay, something which is inborn in you, inherent in you. You are born with a particular ability. Now, a lot of people have the ability to talk, right? But not all can communicate unless they make special efforts to refine and to develop the skill. So, talking is an ability, whereas communicating is a skill. So, it needs to be considered to be a learned skill, and one has to work very hard towards learning how to communicate in a productive and effective manner. So, this brings us to the close of this lecture. In this lecture, we talked about what is communication, the definitions of communication, as well as what communication means or what happens in communication. In the next lecture, we are going to discuss how the process of communication takes place, and we are going to talk about the flowchart that is present, or the flow of information that happens from the sender to the receiver. Thank you.